3 years. That was the price of my survival. 3 years of being bound to a man who saw me as nothing more than a pretty acquisition, a debt to be paid in flesh and obedience. But look at me now. The red robes of the prime scholar draped over my shoulders, the golden tassel of the highest academic honor in the land swaying against my cheek. I had clawed my way out of the mud, out of the darkness, and into the blinding light of the capital's favor. Or so I thought. The heavy silk of my scholar's robe was flicked open by a long, elegant finger. I shivered, not from the cold, but from the terrifying familiarity of the gesture. I kept my head bowed, kneeling on the cold marble floor of the palace, but I could feel the gaze of the man sitting on the throne above me. It was a heavy, predatory weight. "Justin," he said, his voice a low, cultured baritone that vibrated through my chest. "The prime scholar might not be aware, but the crown prince has lost a very precious item, a little runaway treasure that I have been coveting for a very long time." My breath hitched. The voice was different, more refined, sharper, but the arrogance was identical. It took me back to that rainy night in the village, the smell of wet earth and desperation. "Please," I had begged, clutching the coarse fabric of my own sleeve. "My father needs a coffin. A proper burial. I will do anything." The man standing before me then hadn't been an emperor. He was just Robert, the wealthy merchant who had moved into the village. He had looked down at me, kicking the straw sandal at my feet. 10 silver coins, Robert had said, his voice devoid of pity. "That is the price you put on yourself?" "It is enough," I whispered. He had crouched down then, pulling the straw tag from my collar that marked me as goods for sale. "Since you have sold yourself to me," he murmured, his fingers brushing my neck, sending a jolt of alarm through my system. "You understand what that means?" I trembled. "I understand." Robert's eyes, dark as obsidian, had darkened further. He raised a hand, stopping his bodyguard, a brute of a man named Sterling, from intervening. "Anything I want?" Robert asked, his voice dropping to a dangerous whisper. I lowered my head until my forehead touched the mud. "Whatever the master commands." That was the beginning. I followed Robert home, not because I wanted to, but because I had a debt to pay. I was a scholar, raised on ethics and pride, and I would not run from a bargain. The first day, I scrubbed his courtyard until my fingers bled. I washed the clothes he and Sterling had left in a pile, cleared the weeds from the garden, and polished the wooden floors until they gleamed. When Sterling walked in that evening, the large man actually took a step back, blinking in confusion. "Boss," he grunted. "I think we walked into the wrong house." Robert pushed past him, his eyes scanning the immaculate room. He found me in the corner, wringing out a rag. He didn't say a word. He just walked over, lifted me effortlessly over his shoulder, and carried me into the bedroom. He sat me on the edge of the bed and took the rag from my hands. "You don't do this," he said, wiping the grime from my fingers with his own handkerchief. "Not anymore." "But someone has to," I stammered, my heart hammering against my ribs. "Sterling will do it," Robert declared, his tone leaving no room for argument. From that day on, Sterling glared at me with pure hatred, terrified that I had somehow bewitched his boss. But I hadn't bewitched anyone. I was just trying to survive. Robert was complicated. He was a brute, yes. A alpha of the highest order, possessing a strength and aggression that terrified me. He taught me the ways of the world, not with books, but with his body. I remember the first night he truly claimed me. There were no red candles, no wedding wine. Just the heavy, intoxicating scent of his pheromones, cedar and storm rain, flooding the room. "Robert, please," I had gasped, trying to scramble backward. Too late to run. "Justin," he had growled, catching my ankle. "You belong to me." He was relentless. Possessive. He made me call him by his name, over and over, until my voice was hoarse. He was a man of appetites, and I was his only sustenance. I developed a fever that night, delirium taking me for 3 days. When I finally woke, weak and trembling, I tried to run. I made it to the edge of the village before Sterling dragged me back. "I hate you," I screamed, throwing a pillow at Robert's face as they tossed me back onto the bed. "Get out. Get away from me." Robert just caught the pillow, his expression unreadable. He climbed onto the bed, trapping me against the headboard, and kissed my forehead with a terrifying gentleness. "Don't run," he whispered against my skin. "Ask for anything else. jewelry, silk, gold. But do not run. Why? I cried, tears streaming down my face. Why do you care? You own me. Isn't that enough? He didn't answer. He just held me. And that confusion, that bizarre mix of cruelty and tenderness, was what kept me trapped. Months later, I tried a different tactic. I sat across from him at dinner, my hands shaking. I want to study, I said. Robert paused, his chopsticks hovering over his bowl. Study? The state exams, I said, my voice gaining strength. My father died before I could go. I want to finish what he started. I had a secret motive, of course. If I passed the exams, if I became a government official, I would belong to the emperor. No merchant, no matter how wealthy, could hold a servant of the crown against their will. Robert looked at me for a long time. Finally, he nodded. Fine. I thought I had won. I studied day and night. The village aunties would see me reading and cheer me on. You'll be the prime scholar for sure, Justin, they'd say. But as the exam date approached, Robert disappeared on a business trip. I was relieved. If he wasn't there, he couldn't stop me. I packed my bags, ready to leave for the capital. The door creaked open. Justin. My blood froze. I turned to see Robert standing in the doorway, dusting travel grit from his coat. He was back early. He looked at the bag in my hand, then at the books. His eyes went cold. Going somewhere? He asked, stepping into the room. I backed away until my hips hit the desk. The exams, I managed to choke out. It's time. Robert closed the distance between us in 2 strides. The capital is a dangerous place, he said, his voice low. It is a pit of vipers. It is not for you. You promised. I shouted, shoving at his chest. You said I could go? I lied, he said simply. He locked me in the bedroom. For 7 days, I missed the registration window. I missed the exams. I lay in bed, refusing to eat, refusing to speak. When he finally came in to force-feed me rice broth, I looked him in the eye. I hate you, I rasped. Robert's hand trembled. A flash of genuine pain crossed his face, but he masked it quickly. Hate me then, he said, forcing the spoon to my lips. But you will stay alive. And you will stay here. Then, the chaos happened. Sterling rushed in, whispering something urgent in Robert's ear. Robert's face went pale. He stood up immediately. I have to go, he said. It's urgent. He kissed me hard, a desperate, bruising kiss. Wait for me, Justin. He took almost everyone with him. And that was his mistake. 2 days later, news reached the village. The exams had been canceled due to a massive cheating scandal. The emperor was furious. A retest was ordered. My heart hammered a frantic rhythm against my ribs. A retest. I still had a chance. I didn't wait. I used every trick I had learned from watching Sterling. I slipped out the back, bribed a passing merchant caravan, and hid in a crate of tea leaves until we reached the capital. The capital was overwhelming. Noise, color, wealth. I sat in a tea house, trying to catch my breath, when a hush fell over the street. The emperor. Someone shouted. Bow for the emperor. I should have bowed. Instead, I peeked through the bamboo blinds. The royal carriage was passing, the golden curtains fluttering in the breeze. Inside sat a man. Young. Handsome. He was resting his chin on his hand, looking bored. I gasped. Those eyes. That sharp jawline. It was Robert. No, it couldn't be. This man's eyes were slightly more narrow, fox-like. He radiated a lazy, regal power that Robert's rugged intensity lacked. But the resemblance was uncanny. The man in the carriage glanced up. His eyes, green as polished jade, locked onto the window where I was hiding. I ducked back, heart pounding. Had he seen me? I took the exams under a fake name. I poured my soul onto the paper. And when the results were posted, there it was. First place. Prime Scholar. Justin Lee. I was ushered into the palace, not to a throne room, but to an archery range. Whiz. An arrow flew past my ear, severing a lock of my hair, and buried itself in the target behind me. I screamed and fell to the ground. The emperor lowered his bow, a smirk playing on his lips. My apologies, Prime Scholar, he drawled. My aim is usually better. I scrambled to my knees, pressing my forehead to the grass. Your Majesty, please forgive this commoner. Get up, the emperor commanded. He walked over to me, circling me like a shark. You haven't done the victory parade yet. The ride through the streets. I cannot ride, Your Majesty, I stammered. I am terrified of horses. Is that so? The Emperor, Vincent, as I would come to learn, grabbed my waist. His grip was firm, possessive. Then I shall teach you. He hauled me up onto his stallion before I could protest. He mounted behind me, his chest pressing against my back, his arms caging me in as he grabbed the reins. Relax, Justin, he whispered into my ear. His breath was hot. Or do you prefer I command you? We rode out of the palace, leaving the guards behind. He took me to the outskirts of the city, to a grassy hill overlooking the river. It was intimate. Too intimate. As the horse trotted, I bounced against him. I could feel something hard pressing into my lower back. I froze. I knew what that was. That was the royal lineage asserting itself. Vincent chuckled darkly. Uncomfortable, prime scholar? I. Whoosh. Another arrow. This time, it wasn't from the Emperor. It came from the trees. Assassins. Vincent didn't panic. He drew a short sword from his belt, deflected the arrow with a clang of metal, and grabbed me. Jump. We tumbled off the horse, rolling into the tall grass. Vincent shielded my body with his own. I saw blood on his sleeve. Your Majesty, you're hurt. I cried, reaching for his arm. Stay down, he hissed. Suddenly, a second group of men burst from the woods. But they weren't attacking us. They were attacking the assassins. Leading them was a man on a black warhorse, his face a mask of cold fury. He drew a bow and fired 3 arrows in rapid succession. 3 assassins fell dead instantly. The rider turned. It was Robert, but he was dressed in the armor of a general, the crest of the crown prince on his chest. And standing behind him, sword drawn, was Sterling. My world tilted on its axis. Robert wasn't a merchant. He was the crown prince. He was the emperor's nephew. Sterling dragged the last living assassin forward. Speak. Who sent you? The assassin coughed blood. The prince. It was the prince's men. Liar. Sterling shouted, raising his sword. Vincent stood up, dusting off his robes. He looked at Robert, then at the dead assassin. A clumsy frame-up, he said dryly. If my nephew wanted me dead, he wouldn't hire such incompetence. Robert dismounted. He didn't look at the emperor. He looked at me. His eyes were wide, filled with a mixture of relief and terrifying anger. You, Robert breathed. I scrambled backward, bumping into Vincent's legs. Vincent looked down at me, then at Robert. A slow, cruel smile spread across the emperor's face. He reached down and pulled me up, tucking me firmly against his side. Well, nephew, Vincent said smoothly. It seems we have a guest. Robert's jaw tightened. That is the new prime scholar, Vincent interrupted. And he is currently under my protection. We were escorted back to the palace in the royal carriage. The tension was thick enough to choke on. Vincent sat across from me, staring. Robert rode outside, refusing to enter the carriage. Vincent leaned forward, his jade eyes piercing me. So, Justin, you seem to know the crown prince. I gulp. I am a commoner, your majesty. I have never met the prince. Liar, Vincent whispered. He reached out and grabbed my chin, forcing me to look at him. You smell like him. Faint, but it's there. The scent of cedar beneath your fear. I trembled. If I admitted it, I would be executed for deceiving the emperor. If I denied it, I was lying to the emperor. Vincent's thumb stroked my lower lip. You are playing a dangerous game, little scholar. Seducing the prince? That is treason. I didn't. I swear. Vincent leaned in closer. Then prove your loyalty to me. He kissed me. It wasn't romantic. It was a claim. A branding. He tasted of tea and power. I froze, eyes wide open, as the emperor of the land stole the breath from my lungs. He pulled back just as the carriage stopped. Welcome to the Viper Pit, Justin, he murmured. Try not to get eaten. I was given a post in the Hamlin Academy, compiling records. It was a low-ranking job, perfect for hiding. But you cannot hide when 2 dragons are fighting over you. The next morning at court, I stood in the back, head down. I believe, Vincent announced from the throne, his voice echoing through the hall, that the new prime scholar, Justin Lee, is best suited to investigate the corruption scandal. My head snapped up. Me? A rookie? Objection, a voice rang out. Robert stepped forward from the front row. He looked regal, terrifying in his court robes. Justin Lee is inexperienced. This case is too dangerous. Vincent smiled, twirling the jade ring on his thumb. The chancellor recommended him. And I agree. Unless the Crown Prince has a personal reason for wanting to keep Scholar Lee sheltered? Robert's fists clenched at his sides. No, Your Majesty. Good. It is settled. I was thrown into the deep end. I started investigating the previous exams. I found discrepancies. Money trails leading to high officials. I worked late every night, terrified. One evening, I went to the prison to interrogate a suspect, the former chief examiner. As I waited at the gate, shivering in the cold, a warm fur cloak was draped over my shoulders. I turned. Robert stood there. Why did you run? He asked, his voice cracking. I stepped back, the cloak sliding off. Because you lied to me. Because you imprisoned me. I was protecting you. Robert snapped, grabbing my shoulders. Do you know who your father was? He was Qin Huaiyuan, the most famous scholar of his generation. And he was executed for treason. I stopped breathing. My father. A traitor? You are the son of a traitor, Robert hissed. If the court finds out, you will be dead before sunrise. That is why I kept you in the village. That is why I stopped you from taking the exams. I stared at him. You knew? All this time? Yes. Then why didn't you tell me? I screamed, pushing him away. Why treat me like a pet instead of a person? Because I wanted to keep you safe. I don't need your safety. I need the truth. I stormed into the prison, leaving him standing there. But the stress, the cold, and the shock took their toll. I collapsed right there in the hallway. When I woke up, days later, I couldn't open my eyes. My body felt heavy, paralyzed. But I could hear. He called you a pervert 76 times in his sleep, a servant's voice whispered. I heard a heavy sigh. That was definitely directed at you, nephew. No, uncle, Robert's voice argued. The 119 times he called someone a lecherous bastard. That was clearly you. I wanted to die. I wanted the ground to swallow me whole. I forced my eyes open. Vincent and Robert were sitting by my bed, drinking tea like they weren't mortal enemies. You're awake, Vincent said, putting down his cup. Good. You have work to do. Robert rushed to my side, grabbing my hand. Justin, how do you feel? I snatched my hand back. Like I'm trapped in a room with two lunatics. Vincent laughed. Feisty. I like it. I recovered, but the investigation stalled. The trail led south, to Jiangnan. I needed to go there. Robert wanted to come, but Vincent ordered him to stay in the capital to handle state affairs. I went alone. Or so I thought. 2 days into the journey, my carriage stopped. The door opened, and Vincent climbed in. Your Majesty? I squeaked. I was bored, he declared, stretching his long legs out. And you look like you need a bodyguard. We traveled south. It was confusing. Vincent was charming, intelligent, and utterly distinct from Robert. Where Robert was intense and brooding, Vincent was playful and sharp. He taught me how to read the political landscape, how to spot a lie in a ledger. But the danger followed us. In Jiangnan, we found the evidence. The current chancellor, a man named Chu, had framed my father years ago. We found the letters in an old ancestral hall. But Chu's men found us. They set fire to the hall. Trapped in the burning building, smoke filling my lungs, I clutched the letters to my chest. I'm going to die here, I thought. Suddenly, a silver hook on a chain smashed through the window, wrapping around my waist. I was yanked backward, flying through the smoke and flames, landing hard in the wet grass outside. Vincent stood over me, winding the chain back into a mechanism on his wrist. Need a lift? He grinned, though his face was soot-stained and worried. We retreated to a safe house. But something was wrong. My body. It was burning. Not from the fire. From inside. Vincent, I gasped, clawing at my collar. It's hot. It's so hot. Vincent froze. He sniffed the air. The scent of sweet peaches exploded in the room. You're going into heat, he realized, his eyes darkening. Now, here, it was the stress. The danger. It triggered a biological reaction I couldn't control. I collapsed onto the bed, writhing. I need. Please. Vincent stood by the bed, his hands clenched into fists. I am an alpha, Justin. If I touch you now, there is no going back. I don't care. I sobbed. Please. He leaned down, brushing my hair back. I am not the only one you want, is it? Before I could answer, the door burst open. Robert stood there, chest heaving, his horse foaming at the mouth in the courtyard. He had ridden from the capital without stopping. Get away from him. Robert roared, drawing his sword. Vincent didn't flinch. He is in heat, Nephew. And he needs help. Unless you want him to die from the strain? Robert looked at me, whimpering on the bed. He dropped his sword. The next few hours were a blur of sensation. It wasn't a gentle loving. It was a negotiation of power. Two dominant alphas, natural rivals, forced to share the one thing they both craved. Robert's hands were rough, desperate, claiming me as his lost treasure. Vincent was calculated, skilled, driving me to peaks of pleasure I didn't know existed. They argued over me, growling threats, but their hands never left my skin. Mine, Robert growled, biting my shoulder. Ours, Vincent corrected, his voice ragged. When the fever broke, I lay between them, exhausted and thoroughly marked. I looked at the ceiling, wondering how my life had become this impossible, scandalous mess. We returned to the Capitol with the evidence. We confronted Chancellor Chu in the throne room. You have no proof. Chu screamed. I have the letters. I shouted, holding them up. You framed my father. You stole his life. Chu sneered. And who will believe you? The son of a traitor? The boy who warms the beds of the emperor and the prince. The court gasped. My face burned. It doesn't matter who I am. I cried. Justice matters. Chu laughed. He pulled a dagger from his sleeve and lunged at me. But I didn't dodge. I didn't run. I ran toward the balcony. If my death is what it takes to prove his guilt, I yelled, stepping onto the railing, then so be it. Justin. No. Robert and Vincent screamed in unison. I looked back at them one last time. I saw the terror in Robert's eyes, the crack in Vincent's composure. They did care. They truly cared. I let go. I fell. Wind rushed past my ears. And then, snap. The silver hook. Vincent had fired it from the throne. It caught my ankle, leaving me dangling upside down over the palace courtyard. I swung there, dizzy and terrified, as guards swarmed Chancellor Chu. Vincent hauled me up, hand over hand, until he could grab my collar. He dragged me over the railing and threw me onto the floor. He was shaking. If you ever, he whispered, his voice terrifyingly quiet, do that again. I will lock you in the deepest dungeon and throw away the key. Robert dropped to his knees beside me, burying his face in my neck. You idiot. You absolute idiot. Chancellor Chu was executed. My father's name was cleared. I was a hero. But I was done with the palace. I was done with the schemes. 3 months later, I stood in the doorway of a small schoolhouse in a quiet village. The children were reciting poetry. It was peaceful. It was simple. I heard the sound of horses. 2 of them. I sighed, leaning against the doorframe. I didn't even need to look. Class dismissed, I called out. The children ran out, giggling as they passed 2 tall, imposing men standing in the yard. Robert looked tired but happy. Vincent looked smug. You thought you could hide? Vincent asked, tapping a riding crop against his boot. We have a debt to settle, Scholar Lee, Robert added, stepping closer. You ran away without saying goodbye. I crossed my arms. I am a teacher now. I have no time for royals. Vincent stepped up to me, crowding my space. Then we shall enroll. I have always wanted to learn. Poetry. Robert moved behind me, his chest pressing against my back. And I need a tutor in. Discipline. I looked at the blue sky, then at the 2 men who had turned my life upside down. Detention, I said, trying to suppress a smile. Both of you. Inside. Now. They followed me in, and as the door clicked shut, I knew my quiet life was over. But looking at them, at the way they looked at me, I realized I didn't mind the noise at all.